Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is causing liberals to go insane. And so now the Washington Post is actually calling for President Bolsonaro's impeachment. That's right. The leftist activists disguised as journalists continue their crusade to impeach the rising tide of nationalist, populist, conservative leaders throughout the entire world. But alas, it's all for naught. So we're going to take a look at the latest example of impeachment mania, what's really behind it, and how it all promises to collapse before the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. We're going to absolutely love it. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. I certainly hope you're all having a safe and sound locked down Friday. Before we get into the latest left-wing fails coming out of Brazil, a quick note to make sure to click on the link below and check out the video we did on our brand new Turley Talks Insiders Club. I think you're going to absolutely love what we have to offer here, and you'll definitely want to be a part of this international fellowship of conservatives from all over the world who, like you, share a passion to see our conservative values triumph everywhere. You're going to absolutely love it. And finally, if the coronavirus has turned your financial life upside down and you need help to sort out your choices to get you back on track, you should definitely talk to our good friends over at Noble Gold. Now, their team has helped hundreds of families through this crisis, and they can guide you right back to safety and give you ideas on how to get there. Now, remember, when you need a financial friend, Noble Gold will always be there for you. So give them a call at 877-646-5347. That's 877-646-5347. Or you can just hit the link down below and get your free investor's guide. Tell them Dr. Steve sent you. You'll be glad that you did. All right, let's dive in here. Some neat stuff going on. Let me set some context here for you. Now, as many of you know, Brazil, which is by far the largest nation in South America, it has recently turned to the nationalist populist right with the election of the Christian conservative Jair Bolsonaro as president. Bolsonaro won in a total landslide victory with over 55% of the vote, and was an astonishing victory given the ways in which Marxists have dominated Brazilian politics over the last few decades. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Sao Paulo Forum, right? This was a meeting that took place, originally back in the early 90s after the Soviet Union fell. And what you had was called the Sao Paulo Forum. It featured a meeting between Fidel Castro and all these far leftists throughout Latin America and Marxist communists. And they basically said, what just fell in Europe will rise again, but this time in Latin America. And so Brazil for the last 30 years has had basically only Marxist political candidates for president. They've been under a Marxist regime for the last 30 years. They were considered a safe haven for left-wing globalism. And then Jair Bolsonaro comes in, and in a matter of months, he destroys it. He's crushed this Marxist safe haven and is currently reinventing Brazil as a new, thriving nationalist, populist, and traditionalist nation. So obviously the mainstream Marxist media hates him for it, right? For example, Bolsonaro has recently abolished LGBT propaganda from public school curricula throughout the nation, and they're replacing it with pro-Christian, pro-traditionalist, conservative cultural material. And so, of course, the media is freaking out over all this. They're saying, how dare you destroy our attempt to destroy the family, right? So they're doing everything they possibly can to try to bring down President Bolsonaro, to discredit him, mock him, impugn him, just like the absurd antics that characterize our mainstream media's coverage of President Trump here in the United States. Our mainstream media puts more trust in the Chinese government-controlled Marxist media than they do with the White House coronavirus briefing. So, let that hit you. They're so far gone that they trust President Xi more than they trust President Trump. That's how bad our media's gotten. And it's no different in Brazil with President Bolsonaro. Okay, so that's the context. Now, the latest absurdity comes from the Washington Post. They feature an op-ed by a Brazilian left-wing activist named Rosana Pinheiro Machado entitled, "Bolsonaro is endangering Brazil. He must be impeached." Okay, now, I don't know what it is with these leftists and their infatuation with impeachment, but nonetheless, what's so interesting is that, of course, the Washington Post omits the fact that this woman, Rosana Pinheiro Machado, is indeed a far-left activist. They simply present her as, she's an anthropologist, as a scholar from the University of Bath, right? And would you like to hear what a scholar, a responsible academic has to say on things regarding the safety of Brazilians, right? But all you have to do is type her name in Google. I mean, you'll see she's a regular contributor to The Intercept, which is an admittedly far-left site, as well as the ultra-left Jacobin magazine, which is a full-blown cultural Marxist publication. But again, you're not going to hear that from the Washington Post, right? Instead, she's simply a learned scholar who's warning us of the horrors of the Bolsonaro regime. The gist of the article is that President Bolsonaro is not taking the coronavirus seriously. He's overtly rejecting the assessment of his own health experts, and he has, in effect, abandoned his duty to protect the Brazilian population. Again, all this is coming from the supposed disinterested gaze of a learned scholar. And on top of all this, since his election, Bolsonaro has led Brazil by following a fascist playbook, that's right, she uses the F word, attacking the press, destroying human rights, and therefore he must be impeached. His recklessness with the health and safety of all Brazilians, plus the fact that he's a fascist, and I mentioned he's a fascist, means he's got to be impeached immediately. Now this, again, coming from a learned gaze of a disinterested scholar, according to the Washington Post. Now, it's a rather hysterical piece, and what we're finding here is that this Washington Post call for Bolsonaro's impeachment, which, by the way, ain't going to happen, but this impeachment insanity echoes a rather clear pattern throughout the mainstream Marxist media, where the coronavirus is being weaponized to try to take down nationalist populist leaders around the world. This is precisely how Victor Hansen is interpreting what's going on. The coronavirus is currently being weaponized by the left to advance their Marxist agenda. And who, may I ask, stands in the way of that agenda? Well, it's nationalist populist leaders like President Trump and President Bolsonaro and Prime Minister Orban and the Law and Justice Party in Poland and Putin in Russia and on and on and on, right? And so what we're seeing is a pattern emerge among these left-wing activists disguised as journalists. And that pattern is the attempt at driving an adversarial wedge between the nationalist populist president and his health experts. Okay, they're actively attempting to drive an adversarial wedge between, say, President Trump and Dr. Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He's the lead member of President Trump's coronavirus task force, right? Dr. Fauci has actually had to come out and excoriate the press for deliberately, again, that's the key word, deliberately attempting to drive a wedge between his approach to handling the coronavirus epidemic and President Trump's. And he said on numerous occasions, there is emphatically no division. I mean, it's so insane. Remember, the media actually claimed, they actually accused President Trump of putting a gag order on Dr. Fauci a few weeks back. Do you remember that? And Fauci had to come out during the press conference and say, what the heck are you people talking about? It's a bald-faced lie. He's never, ever been asked or instructed to remain silent on anything by the Trump administration. But again, this is what you get when you have a bunch of left-wing activists disguised as journalists. And they're doing the exact same thing to President Bolsonaro in Brazil. Look at this piece from Reuters. Brazil's Bolsonaro isolated, weakened by coronavirus denial. And then it goes on to supposedly detail, from of course anonymous sources, how Bolsonaro is at war with his own health minister. And then we're told that the Brazilian public is overwhelmingly on the side of the health experts. According to the latest Datafolha poll, only 35% of Brazilians approve of Bolsonaro's handling of the health crisis, while 55% support Mandetta. This is his health minister. So you see this wedge we're driving between the nationalist populist leader and his health experts. You see it's working, right? The polls are showing that. So now let's get to impeachment. But unfortunately for these left-wing activists disguised as journalists, reality isn't what they were hoping for. Here's what they're not telling you. Take a look at this poll. According to this Datafolha poll, while it is true that 35% of Brazilians support Bolsonaro's handling of the coronavirus, they support it as good or great. What the Reuters piece fails to tell you is that another 26% say that it's normal, that Bolsonaro is simply doing what they expect him to do, which of course means that 61% of Brazilians see Bolsonaro's response as basically normal to good or great. That parallels the recent Gallup poll that found that 60% of Americans support President Trump's efforts at combating the virus. And the fact that 55% support the Brazilian health minister's efforts only bolsters Bolsonaro, since The health minister is part of Bolsonaro's cabinet. It's only when you superimpose this far left notion of a chasm between the nationalist populist president and his health experts that such a poll could even possibly look bad for Bolsonaro. It's emphatically not. The vast majority of Brazilians support Bolsonaro and his administration in the efforts to combat the virus. What we're finding is that instead of a chasm, there's a complementarity between the president and his health experts. It's not a chasm, it's a complementarity. They each have their own roles to play. Again, it's the same thing here in the United States. Vice President Mike Pence had to remind the fledgling CNN host Wolf Blitzer of that. When Blitzer accused President Trump of downplaying the virus, of not taking it seriously, Pence had to remind him in their interview that while the Democrats were busy trying to impeach President Trump back in January, he was busy implementing travel bans from China in response to the virus. It's the same with Bolsonaro. What these leftist activists don't tell you is that President Bolsonaro has issued the same exact travel bans as President Trump. On January 30th, Bolsonaro declared the virus an official situation of public calamity. He established a public health task force. He's released billions of dollars in aid for state governments to offset losses from uncollected taxes and to aid in health services. The difference, the real difference, is that both Trump and Bolsonaro are trying to inspire hope and optimism among their respective populations, which is something that so-called health experts ain't the best at doing. They're not leaders in the grandest sense of the term. They're technicians, they're engineers, they're analysts, but they're not leaders. And Dr. Fauci's come out and said that here in the States. His job is to analyze the data and make recommendations. It's President Trump's job to assure and to calm and to inspire and to provide hope and optimism. That's precisely what President Trump and Bolsonaro have been doing. They've been preparing behind the scenes for the worst, all the while they reassure the public that we're going to get through this better and stronger than ever. So while left-wing activists around the world are calling for impeachment and all kinds of other hysterics, our nationalist populist presidents are leading their respective nations into a post-globalist order and a flourishing conservative future. Now, before you go, you'll definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it on CNN's latest ratings for the first quarter. Let's just say they're nothing short of embarrassing. You're not going to believe how bad their ratings are. Frankly, you're going to absolutely love it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.